Oh, you stupid motherfucker!
You're gonna find me dead! I'm gonna kill myself!
Hit the fucking guy! What the fuck is he doing?
I'm gonna be hanging from the bathroom!
They got the leg!
Don't ask me to do nothing! This is nothing!
Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Steal Here podcast, where I am your host, Kevin Adams. I am without my partner in crime today, Jersey Jerry. Jerry Don had to get so many things recorded this week for Barstool that he didn't have a chance to record, and we wanted to make sure we got the episode out to you guys on time. But I think you're going to like who we have in Jerry's place today. This is two-time Super Bowl champion, lineman of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Trai Essex. What up, Trai? Welcome to the show.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. For you guys that don't know, I had met Trai, I think it was last year. Trai had come to a terrible tailgate in Atlanta. They were playing the Falcons. Mm-hmm. Trai had stopped by. As you guys know, I am a world-class beer bonger, and I don't lose a whole lot of these beer bongs, but Trai is one man who he can say he actually topped me in the race. So he definitely didn't take off any days when it came to drinking beer in college. Ain't that right, Trai?
No. I developed my craft over many post-game festivities in Northwestern because we didn't win a whole bunch. So we used to have to drown our sorrows in a couple of those brewskis afterwards. And I've developed a pretty good chugging thing. So I'm good.
Absolutely. Speaking of drowning the sorrows, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Trai, they come off of back-to-back losses to two-win football teams. It is the first time in NFL history that a team that is over 500 had lost back-to-back games to teams that are 8 games or worse, under 500. I'm not even going to beat around the bush. Let's just get right to it. After having losses like that, and you start to see games like this starting to compile for the Steelers the last couple of years, do you think that it's fair as much criticism as Mike Tomlin gets, and is he still the coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, or is it maybe time that they turn the page and look somewhere else?
You know what? Let me preface this by saying I have all the respect in the world. Tomlin is my coach. He won a Super Bowl with him, went to another Super Bowl with him, and I've got a good relationship outside of work. But in this game, in the NFL, nobody is above reproach. And if we're going to be real, when you are performing how they performed last week versus two teams that should have been, I'm not going to say easy wins, but we shouldn't have struggled the way we did. Yeah. And it's not just loss, it's how we lost. We didn't put up much of a fight. It wasn't competitive. We had penalties there. There were sloppy plays. There was attitudes on the sideline. And so all that stuff combined, that's a reflection of coaching. And there's no way around it, If we're going to sit here and listen to people talk about Bill Belichick and is it time for him to go, I mean, we got to have this same type of conversation when it comes to Coach T. Now,
right.
All that being said, I think he still can get the best out of this group right now. I think he knows that it is time to put up or shut up. Like all the Tomlinisms and all the stuff in the media, it starts to run old after a while.
Oh, yeah.
The type of performance that we've been doing. And so, no, it is not too soon to talk about, is he the right guy for the job? I think he is. I think hopefully he can turn this thing around. But that question is there, and it's because of the type of product that he's put on the field.
I think a lot of it, and you hinted at it, it's some of the things that just drive me insane, is that it's the same issues over and over every week. We're 14, we're week 13 into this thing, week 12, week 14, and you're still seeing the same types of illegal formation type of penalties. You're still seeing the same type of temper tantrums on the sidelines out of guys that, no disrespect to George Pickens, but I mean, I don't think he's in any position to be throwing temper tantrums the way that he is. I mean, you've not proven shit, for the most part, as far as your career is concerned. It's a lot of that stuff, and it's the same stuff that we've seen out of some Mike Tomlin teams the last, 4 to 5 years. We're coming up on 7 years now, no playoff wins. Those types of things are definitely concerning. And in a league that, is results oriented, it's a what have you done for me lately type of league. As fans, it's kind of hard for us to say, okay, well, he won us a Super Bowl 15 years ago. It will get better next year, when every year it feels like this team is getting further and further from who they were when they won that Super Bowl 15 years ago.
I would agree. And I was talking to couple of my buddies, a couple of former teammates, and this feels different. This feels even the years prior to this when Ben was out and we had to put Duck Hodges and Mason on the field, and they were scrappy and found a way to get to 8-8 or 9-8 or 9. I can't remember exactly, but they were fine. It felt different, because you knew that we had a dearth of talent on the team and that we had lost so much so fast. We lost our quarterback. We lost a lot of our linemen. You tell Pouncey was on his last leg. The Castro was injured and not himself anymore. You tell Villanueva wasn't the same player, which when we get down to it, I think the O-line is actually a bigger issue than the quarterback, and the fact that we couldn't replace those pieces in a timely fashion. Like we drafted Kevin Green, missed on him. Couldn't develop Kevin Dotson, missed on him. Now they're going elsewhere and having success. And then on top of that, there's a rotating door at the offensive line coach position. We got Pat Meyer. This is the only coach that's had 2 years back-to-back O-line coach. It's been 2 years back-to-back since we had Munchak. And so there's a lot of issues coaching-wise on the offensive side of the ball. And when you put that type of product on the field week in and week out, it wears on fans. It wears on players. It wears on an organization. And so something has to change. There has to be some kind of shift in the way that they're thinking, and it needs to be visible. It needs to be tangible. It can't be just talking in press conferences and people saying we're doing all the right thing. No, it has to show up on film. Like Coach Tomlin says, film doesn't lie. And for years now, we've had an abysmal offense, and we refuse to do the things that it would take to switch things around.
Right. And I think that's 100% where I'm at with it. It's more so that, Tomlin and his approach to the game, 15 years ago, you could still win defense first football, run the ball, pound the rock, control the line of scrimmage. That was still a way that you could win football games then. Now they're so far from caring about the offense, or at least it doesn't appear as though they care to change the way that they play on the offensive side of the football, that we're light years behind these other teams. And that's why when you see teams like the Bengals and they have Brown, or you see Tommy DeVito and the Giants, you see these teams that have backup quarterbacks, guys you've never heard of, that you would think that a Mitch Trubisky or a Kenny Pickett should be better than, and yet they're putting up way better numbers across the board than our quarterbacks are and have for the last several years. It has to lead you back to the scheme that the Steelers decide to roll out there. The offensive scheme, the way the Pittsburgh Steelers play football is it's so archaic in the way that you see other people play football that it makes you want to beat your head off a wall, because it's like, look, we go down 18 points early in that game against the Patriots. That game's over. And Tomlin says in his press conference after that, the way that we start games doesn't dictate the ends of the games. But to be honest with you, that's just hot air. That's bullshit. The Steelers, if you're down 18 points, you're more than likely not built to come back to win that type of football game. And so if they're not willing to change their ideology and the way that they approach the game and to want to score more points and put the offense kind of at the forefront of what you should be doing, building your game plan around, I just don't see how it's not time to maybe look in a different direction. If you're not willing to change and the results aren't getting any better, the leash has to be very short on what the ownership is starting to expect out of Mike Tomlin as well.
I would agree. And it's a different league, like you mentioned. And when we were winning before in the 2000s, it was a run-centric offense and who complemented the defense.
Oh, yeah.
And you had other teams that were successful in the league kind of followed that same game plan.
Yep.
But now you see the teams that are winning, the Philadelphias, the Kansas Cities, the Cincinnatis, the Buffaloes, the San Franciscos, the Cowboys.
Yep.
Like those six, you see what their offense looks like. You see what you need in order to win, in order to compete at a high level in the NFL. And if you're not willing to make the changes, then something has to change. And I can't beat around the bush anymore. Like I said, Tomlin's my guy, and I think that he has enough wherewithal right now to know where he's at and that he has to make changes, but he has to do it in a way that makes sense for the personnel that he has. I do think that this offense has talent. I don't think the O-line is great, and I don't think they're getting taught up well.
Agreed.
And there's no identity. Like for 3 or 4 week span there when we were running the ball, how we were running it with Najee being the hammer and Jalen being the lightning, like that worked. But we didn't have any adjustments on defense adjustments to that. And like we had no faith. We had no faith in our passing game. No faith that we can make big plays outside of random fade routes to Deontay or GP. What happened to the deep throws down the middle field when we had Calvin Austin at the beginning of the year? Like, he hasn't touched the ball at all
Right.
since then. Like, why aren't we using these weapons that we had, that we drafted, who I think are good? I think we have good players. Why aren't we moving the pocket more for Kenny? Why don't we have more design runs for Mr. Biscuit? Like, why aren't we doing something that is more creative, that gets the guys excited, you know?
Right.
Nobody wants to see an end around anymore. I'm tired of these damn reverses, man.
Right.
Like, come up with something, gets the guys going, that looks like this offense wants to be explosive, because this is the thing. If you saw one game where we looked explosive during this whole tenure, the last 3 or 4 years, it might give you something to look forward to.
Right.
But then when you see a Jake Browning throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and you see a Tommy DeVito doing what he did, and a Will Levis coming back against Miami for 310 yards, like, and we haven't had one of those games, not one where it looks like we have the ability to be explosive. That is an issue. And we can't just be like, okay, we're winning games enough. We're TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and Minka are winning us games.
It's just not sustainable. That's not sustainable if you want to win a Lombardi. Like, at some point, the offense has to carry the load. You know, the defense is going to have an off day, and that's what we've seen. When we lose this season, it's because the defense just didn't play perfect football. If the defense doesn't play perfect football, the Steelers just more than likely are not going to win that game, because the offense can't pick up the pieces to put it together for the defense having a down day. I'm going to read you something, Trey. It's an interesting stat. Since 2022, the Steelers have surrendered the 6th fewest points in the NFL, yet their point differential is minus 78. I mean, that's the Steelers in a nutshell right there, man. I mean, the defense is doing everything they can do, and yet we're still not winning games. And for me, it's just been that way for too long. And, you know, we continue to bring in these offensive coordinators who showed no success at prior positions. Matt Canada, no success, you know, any prior coaching history. Randy Feitner, that might be Ben's guy. There's a lot of things that circle around that might have been Ben's choice, but it goes back to Todd Haley. That's the last time the Steelers really had the offense where you're like, shit, they can put up some numbers. And that's where it comes back to me. If Tomlin is not willing to put guys in those roles and in those positions that are going to bring in the modern style of offense that we see so successful with lesser talented quarterbacks, simply because the scheme is conducive for success. If he's not willing to bring in a guy like that, we're just going to continue to keep treading, you know, burning our tires here. It's not as though we're not going forward. We're not going back, because the defense is going to carry the load a lot of those games, and we're always going to be right in the middle of the pack. Do you believe in your heart of hearts that Tomlin is of the mindset where he is willing to bring in a guy that, like we're talking about, someone that has the young offensive mind and can push the Steelers forward as far as that side of the ball is concerned?
I don't think he has a choice but to think like that at this point.
Right,
I think he realizes, I mean, the writing is on the wall. The film has been played and seen over and over again. Whether you want to say it's a lack of execution, whether the players aren't buying in, it all revolves around the coaches that they're learning this thing under. Like, you get paid big bucks to coach in the NFL.
Yep.
And you got to deliver results. There's no end about it. And give Tomlin gets some credit for being loyal, but that only goes so far.
Right.
You know, in the NFL, when it's a win now, what have you done for me lately league? We have been kind of complacent with having non-losing seasons.
Right.
We think, and this is my issue. When is the mindset of the GM? Like Kevin Colbert, I love that guy to death, and he had a lot of great drafts.
Absolutely.
But I think on the way out, there was something missing. There was some kind of disconnect between what we wanted as a team moving forward versus what is actually needed to be successful in the NFL.
Agreed. Last 4 to 5 years, you saw a lot that Colbert's drafts have sizzled out. I mean, you can go back and look. I saw a stat recently that there's only like 2 guys in the last 4 drafts of Colbert's that even were still on the roster. You know, that's That's bad, man. That's a lot of turnover. And when you have that much turnover, it leads me to the next part about the culture of the Steelers. You have a lot of turnover. It's hard for guys to really buy into what you are very familiar with. You came into the Pittsburgh Steelers during like one of the primest times of the last 30, 40 years. You know, the culture
Right.
was stronger than ever. You had voices like Paul Amalu and James Harrison, and you had guys that understood what it meant to be Steelers, and Hines Wards and Jerome Bettis's, and you were around a locker room with a bunch of guys that knew on every single day they knew they had to do their job, and they could help keep the guys beside them focused on doing their job as well. Some of the younger guys bringing those values in and instilling it in them. And now as we've gotten 15 years removed of our last Super Bowl, you start to realize, and you hear it more every day out of the media. You hear Ben talking about it, how the Steelers aren't the Steelers, you know, anymore. They've lost the Steeler way. You hear Ryan Clark say these guys just don't have the same thing that we had, you know, 20 years ago. They don't buy in. Nobody gives a shit about the Steeler way anymore. That doesn't mean shit to those guys anymore. And it makes me wonder if you've fallen so far from what you're talking about, you know, we aren't keeping guys around. The drafts weren't great. It's really hard to build that type of culture and maintain that type of culture when your roster is constantly in this, you know, state of flux where it's changing every single season. So when you look at these teams, do you feel as though they carry the same type of mentality as the teams that you played for? You know,
it's not even close. It's not even close. And obviously more so on offense, and we're gonna beat this offense to a drum, but that's exactly what they need. I mean, we got the guys on defense and TJ and Cam and Minka, but even still, I think the way they lead it seems different.
right.
And it's not an indictment against them because they're great players and they've been there for a long time and they have a standard that's upheld.
Yep.
And so I think Cam does a good job of helping the D-line along. So I think he's doing a great job with Benton. And I think TJ helped Alex along and helped Bud Dupree when he was there.
Yep.
And so and Minka does the same thing for the secondary. But we don't have any alphas, no dogs, nobody that's going to get in your face and put you in your place and say, you're not doing what we need to do. You're not holding up your end of the bargain.
Right.
And we had that on offense. We had Alan Fanekas. We had Marvell Smiths. We had the Willie Colognes. We had the Pounceys, you know. We had Hines Ward. There was always somebody that if the position group was lacking, there was somebody in that room to be like, you know what? Get your shit together, man, because this is not how we do it. And and then take a coach. If it gets to the point where a coach has to motivate you, you've lost the team.
Right. And so I think ultimately that's my point. What you just said is my ultimate point at this point for how the Steelers are and how we've seen that culture kind of decay over the last 15 years. And I mean, keeping it all the way 100, it has slowly decayed season after season. You see more of these me first guys and less of your Hines Wards. You see a lot more pouting, crybaby type of stuff out of these young guys. And it's just things that if you would have seen it 15, 20 years ago, the guys you're talking about would have nipped it in the bud immediately. It didn't have to come down to the coaches to do it because you guys held each other accountable. I don't think that this locker room holds each other accountable. And that's why you see a lot of this when there's any sort of confrontation or there's turmoil and you're smacked in the mouth, the Steelers just kind of quit. Like that's honestly who they are. They don't have the same type of fight or dog in them, like you say, that we would have seen 15 years ago. And so if that's the case and the players can't uphold the standard anymore and they can't, you know, continue to instill those values in the new guys coming into that franchise, then to me, where is it supposed to come from? Because if the players aren't doing it, realistically, the last line of defense for making sure things are getting done by the Steeler way, to me, would come from the head coach. And so if we're not seeing it, you know, how do you turn this ship around if you don't have the guys in place in the locker room that can do it? It has to come from Mike Tomlin. And so speaking to when you played, I read something recently that said it was Joe Scobert. You remember Joe Scobert? He played linebacker for us for a couple of seasons.
Yep.
So he did an interview, and in this interview, he said Mike Tomlin's coaching style was very lax in terms of you didn't have set times you had to be there. You didn't have set times you had to work out or do film study or all of these types of things. They just expected that you would do your job as professionals, you know, show up, do your job, go home. For me, if you have that type of locker room now, but you have a bunch of guys like we're talking about, like Deontay's who throw fits, or George Pickens who throws fits, and guys that aren't willing to bust their ass and do what's asked of them, without having somebody look over their shoulder, I think that's where it can turn into a very slippery slope. Because you don't have that veteran locker room presence, especially on the offensive side of the ball anymore. So who is the one that's keeping these guys in check? If it's not the players, who is it supposed to fall on then?
Yeah. And I mean, there's no way around it. I mean, it has to come from the coaches. And so I know why Tomlin does what he does. When there's such a immediate shift, because when Ben left and basically the leaders on the offensive line left, it was like in a span of 1 or 2 years, and all the leaders left all at once. And so there was kind of a mass exodus of veteran leadership on the offense. And so you can't leadership has to be grown organically.
Yep.
You can't really put it into somebody, And so I know that's what Tomlin's trying to do. Let it happen organically. Hopefully somebody will step up and start calling people out. I think he sees that, and that's why I think he's so loyal to Kenny Pickett, because I think Kenny, by all means and by all accounts, is a great leader and has a lot of the intangibles you want as a quarterback. He lacks a lot of the physical skills. And the thing is, when you have the type of personalities you have on offense, no matter how great of a leader you are, no matter how well you talk and you say the right things and you bust your balls working out, if it doesn't show up on the field, if you're not putting up numbers, if you're not consistently playing great, this generation of players will not follow you, no matter how great your intangibles are. And so I know I can see why Tomlin is doing what he's doing. But now it's gotten to the point now where he has to step in. The fact that he even called out GP in his press conference.
The first time we've seen anything like that in a long time.
Right. So I think he's starting to recognize what he needs to do.
Right.
And so hopefully, we're 7-6 and still control our own destiny. Calling them out now in baby steps, like gradually doing it, won't make the type of shift that you would want, but it's still something that needs to be done. And it may not happen as fast as we would like. And so there's yet to be seen if Tomlin can do the things in the time frame that we need him to do them in order to turn this team around, or if a new voice is needed all together, all completely. But I at least think that he sees the issue now, and the fact that the leadership is not growing as organically as he thought or hoped.
Right. No, I agree with that entirely. Let me ask you a question as far as his defenses. So we know that Tomlin, obviously defensive-minded head coach, and that's his bread and butter. That's his baby, is the defense. Do you feel as though the defense kind of is underwhelming, or at least it's been underwhelming the last, we'll say, 7 to 10 years, given that we have as much money and draft capital tied up on the defensive side of the ball as we do? Or you think this is just the NFL and everybody scores points, and if that is the case, then why aren't we looking more to bring in offensive players versus trying to continue to stack a defensive side of the ball that you can't win with anymore?
Valid question. I think it all works hand in hand. I think the defense, when they have the opportunity to play in conjunction with the offense is doing what they're supposed to do, they're a lot better. I think over time, they've got worn down to a nub. Yeah. And so you had those moments where a Bailey Zappi scores 21 points in the first half, had no business doing that. Even it hadn't scored like 10 points like the previous 3 games.
Right. Didn't score the week prior. Didn't score. Right.
You have way too many of those moments that you would like. But I think that what we're seeing is just a culmination of how bad the offense has been and how much the defense has been dependent upon to give us any type of success. And yeah, I think they've got worn down to a nub. And so, but it's still, if this is the way Tomlin wants to run the team, if we're going to be a defensive team with an offense that makes minimum mistakes and doesn't turn the ball over, the defense needs to be more dominant.
That's exactly it. If you're gonna ride a defense to a championship, it has to be like the 2008 Steelers defense. It has to be like the 2000 Ravens defense. It can't be top 10. It has to be number 1.
No, it has to be dominant.
They have to win you more games than your offense does, or at least keeps you in the games enough that you can win a game with 17 points if your offense is going to be as sad as ours is. And so that's why I just don't think, honestly, Trey, I don't think that's realistic anymore. In today's game, I just don't think that type of defense defense is realistic, just simply because it's tailored so much for points. Like the league is just so built to score points. So we keep
Exactly.
trying to jam a triangle peg into a circle hole instead of just adapting with the times. I'm gonna read you something that's interesting. In Mike Tomlin's last five games against first-year head coaches, he's 0-4-1. Okay, 0-4-1. He hasn't beat a rookie head coach in his last 5 tries. Dan Campbell was the tie. That was that Lions tie a couple years ago. You know, so when you look at that type of stuff in the last, since we've won a Super Bowl last, 25 other head coaches in the NFL, or since we've won a playoff game, 25 other head coaches in the NFL have won games. You know, so this is not like a small sample size where the fan base is freaking out and everybody's, you know, calling for Tomlin's head. This is many years of shortcomings and underachieving that at some point you have to point to the top. We've gotten rid of coordinators and defensive coordinators, and the roster has overturned. And, you know, we've gone through this state of flux where we tried to rebuild the offensive line. We've rebuilt some of the defensive line. We've done all of these things the last 5 to 6 years, and yet the product looks pretty much the same as far as the results are concerned. So if you're not willing to point to the top, and that to me goes to Mike Tomlin, I just think that we're just wasting time if you're not really willing to look in the mirror and say, yeah, that guy is equally as much as a problem, because this is 6 years. That's not one bad season. That's not a one bad injury season. Like, that's a pretty decent sized body of work there.
Right. And I think, and the feeling, like I said, it feels different today than it did even the week before we played at Arizona.
Agreed.
I think the 2-10 losses kind of
rock bottom.
We come up to a fork in the road right now.
Yep.
And I think a lot is going to fall on what kind of team shows up this Saturday versus the Colts. Knowing everything that's on the line, knowing the success that we've had in Indianapolis over the past few years.
We've won the last 8 straight against the Colts.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this feels like a fork. This feels like it could either inspire a little bit more confidence, buy Tomlin a little bit more time to do things the way he wants to do, or it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
You think they would ever really move on from him with a year left on his deal, or you think they let him coach out the last year? But for me, this is why it gets a little tricky, is because you need a new offensive coordinator now. Are you going to allow a coach to go into the last year of his contract without re-signing him and bring in an offensive coordinator of his choosing? Or how does those types of things, obviously you being, you know, playing in the NFL, you're going to know a little bit more behind the scenes than I am. Do you think that's something they'll let him do, pick an OC and coach out the last season? Or you think is there any chance that if it continues to go south the rest of this season, that maybe they look elsewhere?
I do think there's a chance they look elsewhere if it continues to look like it did the last 2 games.
Right.
I truly do, because that's just really, really bad football. And we get 4 more games of that. I don't know if Tomlin could survive that type of decline at this point in the season when we were 7-4.
Right.
Like on the other side, when you started out 2-6 and you're improving into the offseason, you got some hope that things can get turned around.
Right.
But when you're losing and you're losing the way that we've lost with the type of product on the field, and it continues to slide towards the end of the season.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think he can survive that, to be truthfully honest. I do think that if he does show some hope, that he will be given another chance with an OC and another year with Omar as the general manager, to kind of see what they can do together in 2 years. And if it doesn't look any better, then I think maybe last year will be his last. But I do think that he can't continue to go about the way he's been going about it, and us keep on playing the way we're playing and expect to survive the 2023 season.
Trai, he said something in his Monday interview that was disturbing to me. So he says, you know, the reporter asks him, why did you throw on 4th and 2? And this is why I think the Steelers are just fundamentally broken by the way that they approach the offensive side of the football. 4th and 2, game on the line, basically season on the line, the way it looked at that point. And you throw a 40-yard go ball, you know, to an undersized wide receiver in double cover. Wasn't single coverage, didn't have that look at the line, nothing like that. 40 yards downfield with the game on the line. And the question that the interviewer asks him is, why was that the play that you guys went with? And he says, we don't live in our fears. We did something similar against the Ravens, you know, threw it deep to win the game. that sounds good if you don't go back and look at, spade for spade. But the problem is 4th and 2 with the game on the line is a lot different than 2nd and 9 when you're already in field goal range to take the lead at the end of that game. That game was 10-10. We were in field goal range to take the lead at the end of that game, even if Kenny doesn't sling it deep to George Pickens. And it's not as though it's the last play of the game. 2nd and 9 is a lot different than 4th and 2. If analytically, and I think sometimes the Steelers are just stubborn in the way that they approach football, you have all of this technology at your disposal, and yet it feels like they just refuse to implement it. Statistically speaking, the analytics would say on 4th and 2, you don't throw 40 yards downfield. I don't care. That's just not the play that you run. You should be looking for something a lot more intermediate, and it's just as though it's when he said that, I'm like, God, if he doesn't realize that those aren't the same things, that's scary as hell to me. That's a stubborn mindset, in my opinion.
I don't think that I think he knows.
Oh, he
I
knows.
think he was
He's very smart. He knows.
He knows. I mean, I think he was banging on the fact that not a lot of people are going to go back and look it up and compare apples to apples. But no, man, that play call was horrible, man. I was cussing at my TV pretty damn loud. And the fact that it was 3rd and 2, we went 5 wide to play before.
Again, right. When you've made your bread and butter the last 6 weeks being the number 1 rushing team in football over a 5-week stretch, we're averaging somewhere around 165 rushing yards a game. Damn well that's your formula moving forward, because your quarterback play has been awful. Just keep it real. It's been terrible. So if you're not going to pound the rock on 3rd and 2, in my mind right there, you should run the ball twice in a row. 3rd and 2, run it. 4th and 2, you run it again. And if you don't trust your O-line and your run game that has been the best part of your offense to gain 2 yards with the game on the line, so be it. I'd rather go down dying like that than putting the ball in the hands of a backup quarterback who's not shown you that he's been good at all in any of his starts, and hope that he completes a 40-yard pass down the field.
No, it makes no sense. Like, when it gets down to the nitty gritty, you want to go to what's been working.
Yep.
And the only thing that has been resembling anything close to working for our offense has been giving the ball to 22 and 30. And that's it. 3rd and 2, 4th and 2, I would have ran that ball 2 times in a row. Obviously, I'm a little biased. I'm a lineman, but still, that's just smart football to me.
It's just using the percentages to your advantage. Using the percentages to your advantage.
And realizing who you have at quarterback. Right. Yeah, he's a veteran. But it's his first start the entire year. And it's a crucial situation against a defense that has had his number, and you're calling a play that hadn't been successful. Yes, we got a touchdown to Deontay early in the game on a play that was very similar, but the situation was not the same.
Right.
The situation was not the same. Give him, if you're going to pass the ball. See, you know what I thought when we went 5 wide? I was like, okay, we're going to run a quarterback draw.
Without a doubt, which would have made the most sense if that's what you were going to do out of 5s.
Right. And it was like, okay, we're not going to do quarterback draw. We're going to hand the ball off to Jalen Warren, or we're going to do some kind of Texas route up the backfield, or we'll do the damn play that we ran a million times where we motion him out to the flats and then throw a little screen pass out there.
Right.
Something to give your players a chance to catch the ball and run after the catch, not some low percentage fade route. And so when he said that in the press conference, and I heard it too, and I was like, okay, he's just being stubborn,
right.
He's not going to give the media what they want. He's not going to give the media what they want. He rarely does. He's going to be Tomlin, and he's going to stay the course. But yeah, that play was frustrating as hell.
Look, Trey, what do you feel about the quarterback spot? I mean, obviously Kenny, he's going to be out, and I'm not going to bash Kenny for these losses because injuries happen, but the injuries are a concern with Kenny Pickett, and it's not just that. He's had 25 starts. He is statistically the worst starting quarterback in the history of football through 25 starts. I mean, we could run down the list of guys, the Tommy DeVitos, the Jake Brownings, Josh Dobbs, Joe Flacco, for fuck's sake. I mean, you're talking about guys that are all putting up significantly better numbers than Kenny Pickett has. Do you believe, and you said it, he has all of the traits that you would see out of a good starting quarterback. He's always going to work his ass off. He's going to say the right things. He's going to put in the time that it takes, all of that stuff. But sometimes, Trey, as you know, you can be the hardest worker in the room, in the building, in the league. But if you just don't possess the physical traits that it takes to play that position, it's really hard to yield any success. That's my fear with Kenny Pickett. I think that might be where he is he just has everything else except for one of the most important parts, and that's the physical attributes that it takes.
Yeah. And he hasn't shown anything otherwise. Like I said, if there was just one game where he bought it, I'm not counting the game right after Canada because he threw for 277 yards and a touchdown.
No, he didn't even throw a touchdown.
That's his best game ever.
Right.
Like that's his best game ever in 2 years. And despite the OC, despite our offensive line, you would have thought that somebody that you drafted in the first round, who had the type of year that he had at Pittsburgh, even though that was his only year really, putting up big numbers. But if you're going to do that and you're going to give him every opportunity to prove to you that he's the guy, you need some kind of game, some kind of outlier maybe that you can point to and be like, okay, he's shown flashes.
Right.
He has not shown flashes.
Right.
He had some great games in the fourth quarter last year towards the end of the year. I'm not going to take that away from him.
Yep, and that's what most Steelers fans say in defense. If they're defending him, it's that, down the stretch last year, he started to get it figured out, which I agree. And as you agree, we won those games. He looked better down the stretch, but then last year's is last year. This is a new season, and other than maybe the Raiders game in week 3 where he has the long ball to Calvin Austin, and we score that touchdown and he looks good there. He had 2 touchdowns in that game. That is the only game in his career he has thrown for 2 touchdowns out of 25 tries, man. That's like Bailey Zappi. You mentioned Bailey Zappi. Bailey Zappi has 4 starts. He has a 100 passer rating, a 118 passer rating, a 68.9, and then a 115.2. Kenny never even sniffs those kind of numbers, man. And we're talking about the first quarterback taken in the draft. So are you confident in Kenny for the future going into next year? Because in my opinion, the Steelers are built to win right now. That's why you pay the defense what you've paid them. That's why you have guys that are in position. Your Cam Haywards, whose career is coming towards an end. You have Minka paid. You have Highsmith paid. You have TJ paid. You've spent all the money on the defense because you think you can win right now. But can you win right now with Kenny Pickett as your quarterback?
We can get to 9-8 with Kenny at quarterback.
That's the problem.
But we won't be contenders if this is Kenny Pickett.
Agreed.
And there's nothing, like, he's had more than enough time, way more time than a lot of quarterbacks have to prove that he is better than what he's shown on tape. And his leash is way longer than it should be. And there's nothing, like, you can't point to anything that he's done outside of some fourth quarter comebacks last year. He has not put together 4 quarters of work, I guess, except for the Cincinnati game after Canada. You can say he played well at the beginning, and that was his best game, and it still wasn't great. It was just an average good game in the NFL. One you don't ever think about fucking 10 years, like 2 years from now. I won't even make memory of that game because it was just a game. We're overhyping how good that game was. We scored 13 points. And I try to keep things in perspective. Like, yes, you'd like to see improvement, but that game was nothing special offensively. It was just way better than our offense has done for years.
But the bar's so low that, like, a game like that feels amazing. And so for me, the interesting thing is, and the slight that people will make is that, well, he was forced to play under Matt Canada's system for 2 years. I agree. I think Canada's scheme was terrible. Yeah. I don't think it was NFL worthy at all. But if that's the excuse that we're going to make for Kenny, there are a lot of other quarterbacks that play in bad schemes, bad systems, with bad O-lines, that weren't drafted in the first round that can produce. That's part A of this. But part B would come back to, if that's the case and that really we broke Kenny Pickett because he played under Matt Canada's system, then again, that to me falls back on the shoulders of Mike Tomlin for bringing Matt Canada back this season, for having Matt Canada back again last season, which was Kenny's rookie season. So it's these are all things that, for me, if you look at the culmination of the Steelers' failures, it all comes back to poor decision making in those types of situations.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think if they should have known, Kenny's his skill set dictates he is not a lot of room for error.
Exactly.
And they made all the errors by bringing Canada back. And so he doesn't have any space for improvement left anymore, because you can say that he's broken. He got broken early when he didn't have any kind of leeway whatsoever to be broken at all.
Right.
And so you got to do something. I think that maybe he could be a good stopgap until we find something. But Like, I'm all in on bringing some kind of veteran
Agreed,
into
man.
our locker room next year.
Agreed.
And maybe that recalibrates Kenny. But like, you need to bring somebody that somebody can look to, like, oh, that guy has success. George Pickens, like, that guy has thrown for a lot of yards in the NFL. I can have a big game with him.
Who comes to mind for you?
Kirk Cousins.
100%, brother. It's fucking Kirk Cousins. Like, that's the guy. That is if the Steelers really believe they're in win now mode still right now, which I don't think they're far off. I think the O-line needs some tweaking. No doubt about it. We need a real center. That's a big thing. The center has been a major issue on this football team. You get a real center, you get a middle linebacker, something that we're injury ravaged in. It's not as though we don't have playmakers. Freiermuth is plenty good enough at tight end. GP and Deontay are plenty good at wide receiver. You maybe get a slot guy. Allen Robinson isn't the solution we hoped he was. You don't know what Calvin Austin is entirely because we just don't have a scheme that was going to, be conducive for his type of success. But for me, you bring in a Kirk Cousins. If we had Kirk Cousins this entire season, even under the same scheme, everything else was the same. You just plug Kirk Cousins into this team. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are contending for the 1 seed in the AFC just because it's so weak of a conference this year.
You're so weak. I totally agree with you. And yeah, like when you put a guy like that inspires confidence, every difference makes a difference, and it gets extrapolated over the entire offense.
For sure.
And so, but that's what you got to be willing to pull that trigger and not be stubborn and set in your ways just because you want to prove somebody wrong, which I think that's a lot of thinking that goes along with Tomlin. I think he's so steadfast in his way of thinking, and you got to be confident. You got to be arrogant to be a head coach in the NFL.
Absolutely.
But like at some point, you got to be willing to admit your mistakes and be willing to do the things to correct them.
Hubris is the downfall of a lot of great, empires, is just your own hubris. And that's for me, what I think a lot of it comes down to Tomlin. I just think he, like you said, I think he's so steadfast in his belief. And I don't think it's a matter that he's stubborn to the point he won't change. I think he genuinely still believes that you can still win football games, ground and pound, ride on the defense. We don't have to score 30 points. And the league just, the past 15 Super Bowl winners have proven you better be able to average 27 points per game or more. The Steelers haven't averaged 27 points per game since 2016. So, I mean, that's just, everything that you need to happen. We don't, that's where it comes back to the analytics. We just don't, in a modern world, you can use all the numbers to your advantage. And I just don't think that they do.
Yeah. No, I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm not a huge fan of living and dying by them, but they are a tool.
Oh,
just like
absolutely.
Watching film is, and if you got to realize the fact that there's only been one team that has been semi-successful these last few years who had that ground and pound type of offense and not great quarterback play, but just complimentary quarterback play. And that was the Tennessee Titans. And you saw like they would win a playoff game, but then they would falter because that does not work anymore. That does not work.
It's not sustainable. When you get through that gauntlet, it's not sustainable to rely on the run game first.
What Baltimore is doing. Baltimore, who is known that they are adjusting. They gave Lamar Jackson a new OC because they're like, we can't win this way anymore.
And Zay Flowers and OBJ.
Isaiah Likely. And they drafted Tyler Lindenbaum, who I wish we should have got.
Yeah, no shit, man, right.
But yeah, like they are adjusting. And Baltimore used to be our mirror opponent, our mirror. Like if there was any team that was built similarly to us, it was Baltimore. That's why our rivalries are always so intense. But they are adjusting with the times.
Yep.
John Harbaugh's not afraid to go away from what worked before because he understands that things are different now. And I got to give my quarterback more chances to be successful because the way under Roman was not working.
Right.
Even though they had success with Roman, but they knew right then they had to make a shift in order to keep up with the times.
Christ, you speak of Harbaugh, but one thing I will say about Harbaugh is, and everybody that will claim that Mike Tomlin is still this elite head coach, is he still elite? He's not. And there's no way you can say he is because the numbers just don't lie. He's just not an elite coach anymore. But one thing Harbaugh did, and it comes to the change conversation that we're having, that year they went on to win the Super Bowl. If you remember, they changed their offensive coordinator. They fired him in season in like week 13 or something, week 12, something like that.
My guy from the Colts who took over. Why am I drawing a blank on his name?
It's
Caldwell.
Caldwell. Yep. Yep.
Caldwell came in.
And
they've done that a couple of times. They did that. They fired Cam Cameron.
Yep.
And brought in Caldwell, who was already there as a special assistant, but he started calling the plays. And Flacco had the best postseason in like the last 20 years or something.
Goes on to win the Super Bowl doing it. So change sometimes in the NFL is very welcomed. I understand the stability in staying the course and what you're trying to accomplish with that. But sometimes when the course is not going where it needs to go, something has to change. Trey, I appreciate the hell out of you stopping by. I was excited to have you on mostly because I see what you tweet and you've really started to carve out a market on Twitter and you're just honest. Mm-hmm. And there are very few ex-players that are willing to be critical of the quarterback play, of the coaching shortcomings, of the results of games, of the offensive failures. And you're not afraid to fan the fire whenever you see and you speak to it and you believe the things that you're saying are not the way that they should be for the Steelers. You'll at least man up and say it, and a lot of players will not. And I think that's why you're finding so much success on Twitter, is because as fans, that's what we relate to. Like keep it mm-hmm. fucking real. And that's why this show that Jerry and I do is successful, is because we will be brutally honest, even if it's not what you want to hear. And you right. have that, and you're doing your own podcast soon, right? I think I saw that.
Yeah, man. Me and my man, Rich Rodewalt, a guy that I've known for a while who happens to be a Browns fan, but the dynamic works out because he's a very realistic Browns fan. So we got some good right. Back and forth. He understands how much they suck, and he's living his life now knowing that they're in a better situation than us right now.
It's unfortunate to say.
It's called Pod Me Up. We're going to start bringing out shows every Tuesday and Thursday, man. Just give you some of the same stuff I've been putting on Twitter, man. I'm a fan now that used to play football, you know? Yeah. And so I'm in the same seat as y'all. I just have a little bit more insight just because I was in there and I understand some things that maybe the casual fan doesn't know. And so I like bringing that type of insight to everybody so he can understand how it looks through the eyes of a player. And I think it's going to be pretty good, man. We can just keep on doing what we're doing. And I appreciate you for having me on.
Absolutely.
And being able to pub that, man. But this was fun, man.
Absolutely. No, we appreciate it. We'll have you on again. I'll have to get you back out to another terrible tailgate. I think your Pod Me Up, that's platformed by Steeler Nation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So the guy who is my partner with the Terrible Tailgate is Justin, and so we'll have to get you out to another home tailgate, do a little rematch on the bongs. Maybe it was just an off day for me, but
I've got nothing but better since then.
Yeah,
you know, I improved, man. I don't have any offensive coordinators out here calling plays for me. I'm doing it by myself, so I'm good.
Love to hear that. No, I appreciate it, Trey. You have a nice holiday. Thank you for stopping by, and we'll get you on again for sure. I wanted to get you on with Jerry because Jerry had some things that he wanted to ask you too, kind of about the locker room and some of the stories that you had. So we'll definitely have to cross over and have you on again. But I appreciate you taking the time today.
Most definitely, my man.
Later, brother.
We're here. We're still here.
We are still here.